Hey folks, all right, good news. You got a purchase agreement representing a buyer under contract. Now what? So we're going to talk about that today. This is called Buyer 201. Think when you're graduating 101, you move to 201. We're going to talk about a couple key factors today. One, meaning the earnest money deposit. Two, home inspection. Three, appraisal. Four, final steps, including insurance, utilities, and walkthrough. And then number five is going to be closing and keys. Now, your earnest money deposit, remember, this is typically 1% of the purchase price. However, whatever you put on the contract is the number you need to worry about here. It is nicknamed the EMD, and it is always held by the attorney or settlement company. Keller Williams does not hold these. So you will have your client write a check directed to the settlement company or the attorney. A matter of fact, I actually ask all buyers to drop that off themselves so they can get a receipt at the time of dropping it off. There are some settlement companies like Title Alliance out there who will have a mobile deposit option where they can use an app to actually deposit, link, or wire the money that way. The earnest money deposit holds the property pending for your buyer off market. Now, it will count towards the cash to close that settlement. However, the buyer does need to have that amount in their funds or in their account, their checking account, et cetera, that they're pulling the money out of, because the money will leave their account. It will be held in an earnest deposit account by the attorney or the settlement company specific to that buyer and that property. It is typically needed to be received within 5 to 7 days of the contract, and you will get a copy of the receipt, or at least your buyer will, and typically the settlement company will send you a copy as well, and you can upload that to the command documents tab. Now, once you've dropped off the EMD, the next step is the home inspection. Technically, this should already be having been started because you're going to have a home inspection window according to the contract. Remember, if nothing is put, it defaults to 10 days. The home inspection window is when the report, the repairs request, including the cost of repairs, all must be given to the seller within that 10-day window. We're going to use 10 days for the sake of today's training. Obviously, whatever's on the contract is what it becomes. Now, a buyer always pays the cost of the home inspection. In most cases, the cost is required to be paid prior to the home inspection even being done. There are some companies out there that will still do the home inspection and the payment must be done before the report is released. Either way, you want to give your buyer the expectation that this is another out-of-pocket expense they're going to have prior to closing. Most home inspections run in that $400 to $600 range. It will depend on the company itself, as well as the age of the home, and probably most importantly, the size of the home. Now, your negotiation period is something different than the home inspection period. Once the repairs request is sent over, your negotiation period starts. It is 7 days for the seller to send a response to you. Now, once that 7 days has passed, your purchaser has another 2 days from that last day that the 7 days happened. So let's use some examples here. If you send repairs request on the 9th, the 10th is when that timeline is going to start taking effect. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You have 7 days. So the 16th is when the seller has to have responded in writing to your repairs request. If they have not responded, or even if they have responded, your purchaser then has 2 additional days until 5 p.m. to make a response. So we're at the 16th. Let's say the seller replied on the 13th or the 14th. It doesn't really matter what day, as long as it was within that 16 days. Or if the seller has not replied at all, your purchaser has until 5 p.m. on the 18th to make a decision. That decision is one of two things. Send another negotiation and you continue to go back and forth. They can accept the seller's last counter, or if nothing is given, the agreement automatically terminates. And we just had this happen last week. So this does take effect, and it's a newer change that's been added to the purchase agreement. So you want to make sure your buyer and you are on top of all of these dates. Now, typically what's going to happen is you're going to get the report, you're going to get the repairs request, and you're going to send everything over to the seller to negotiate these repairs. Now, remember, the cost of repairs or the estimated cost to cure these repairs must be included on that repairs request. The home inspection report is typically going to have it, and it will have a range. It is okay to give that range. So if it says 250 to 350 to fix something, put 250 to 350. Neither party can require credit be paid in lieu of repairs. Now, it is a negotiating option. It just cannot be required. So if we ask for 10 repairs and the seller comes back and says, we'll do a credit instead of repairs, the purchaser does not have to take the credit, and vice versa. The purchaser cannot say, hey, we just want money. We don't even want you to fix the repairs. If the seller wants to fix the repairs instead of a credit, they are within their right to do so. Now, they have to use licensed contractors. That is within the terms of the contract itself on the purchase agreement. Invoices and or receipts must be provided prior to settlement. That is also in the purchase agreement. And on the purchase agreement video, we talked at length about the optional paragraph. Typically, we want to check that it is not applicable, which means that the purchaser will request repairs be done prior to making any decisions about terminating the agreement. Now, if the seller counters and does not agree to fix any of the repairs, even if it's just a single item that your purchaser wants fixed, the seller or the purchaser can then terminate the agreement and use a release to get their earnest money deposit back. There are a lot of important nuances when it comes to writing a home inspection or doing a home inspection and writing these repairs requests. You want to make sure you fully understand these terms prior to doing it. The most important takeaways are on this slide. However, a lot of them apply to the buyer is always paying for the home inspection. Even if the seller does not agree to fix repairs and your buyer has to walk away, that is a cost that your buyer has incurred. You must include the report, the repairs request, and the cost of repairs when you ask for those repairs to be done. All of that must be done within the inspection period written on the contract. The negotiation period and how to go back and forth, that language is in the purchase agreement. Please read it, watch Michael Lafayette's video, attend the contract classes, and make sure you're fully aware and understand that. Now, the next step, typically the next step, and a lot of times lenders will wait until you've given the green light that you're moving forward on the home inspection before they have ordered the appraisal. However, they are required to order the appraisal within 15 days of the ratified contract. So the appraisal is a third-party evaluation of the property. If you are getting a loan and there has not been an appraisal waiver granted, you will have one of these done. Some folks confuse this with a home inspection. An appraiser is not doing an inspection of the property. Now, depending on the loan type, they may have to note certain defects or repairs that are needed in order for the bank to agree to give a loan on the property. These are typically safety concerns or structural violations. However, I've seen everything, and so it is always good habit to be aware of what may come up on an appraisal. The appraisal has to be equal to or greater than the purchase price. So if you're agreeing to buy a house for $100,000, the appraisal must be for $100,000 or more. If it is lower, we will talk about what your options are in a second. If it is higher, you still buy it for the purchase price. So if you agree at $100,000, appraisal comes in at $110,000, that just means your purchaser got a good deal. If the appraisal comes in low, a couple of things can happen. The listing agent, in conjunction with the seller, can argue against the appraisal. In other words, they're going to ask for a revaluation. They're going to submit their own comparable properties and show where they got the list price and ultimately the purchase price from. These are not done with high success. However, it can happen. Typically, and the purchase agreement says this, the seller is expected to come down to the appraisal price. So if you have an agreement for $100,000, and the appraisal comes in at $90,000, the seller is expected to edit the contract and adjust the purchase price to the $90,000. This can also become an open negotiation, meaning the purchaser may agree to pay the difference in terms of cash. If there were closing costs or seller concessions given, those can be negotiated differently to adjust for the new purchase price. It is also okay for the agent to not hear. What I mean by that is if an appraisal comes in equal to or higher than the purchase price, the buyer agent may never hear about it. The appraisal belongs to the buyer because they are the one ordering it through their lender. So typically an appraisal copy will come to the lender and the buyer themselves. Now, it is required for them to receive a copy of their appraisal. So if they do not, they cannot go to closing, and they will actually sign something at closing saying that they did receive a copy of the appraisal. I like to tell agents that we coach, you will only hear about an appraisal if there is a problem, or if your buyer just tells you, hey, the appraisal came in. Most lenders will also share it with you. Appraisal came in, we're all good to go there. If repairs are required due to the appraisal, you will hear about those as well. It is not just a value issue. However, that should be kind of a quick rundown on what the appraisal looks like. Once you have gotten through the home inspection, the repairs request, and the appraisal, you move into what I call final steps phase. Now, there are a lot of nuances that move around here, and yet they're pretty easy to checklist or go through. Number one is insurance. The lender is going to help you with this, and most buyers are going to handle this on their own. However, it is an opportunity for you as an agent to provide another value add. You want to connect your buyer with a preferred insurance provider to see if they can save them any more money. Homeowners insurance is required, and it will be required to close the property on the loan. And so it's a good opportunity for you to connect them to somebody, and this is the timeline when you would do it. Most insurance brokers or providers are going to like a group text saying, this is my buyer, John Smith. He's pending closing on the 16th of December at 123 Main Street. Can you connect with him about insurance quotes and options? And then that will get handed over to the lender. Utilities, your job as the buyer's agent is to coordinate with the buyer to have them call all of the applicable utilities to have them set up for the day of or the day after closing. Or if they have a move-in date, they could set that up as well. If there's gas to the property, if they're obviously there's hopefully electric to the property, they're going to call Dominion Power for electric in most cases. What internet provider they want to use, if they're having trash services, and then water and sewer. Now, obviously, if it's on a well, they're not going to have water and sewer, well and septic. However, they would still need to have the other ones. It is the seller's responsibility and the listing agent's responsibility to remind them to call these utility companies to have it turned off of their name or out of their name at the same closing time frame or move out time frame. So depending on which side of the contract you're on, you want to make sure your folks are aware of that. Repairs, receipts, and invoices. If there are repairs agreed upon as a part of the home inspection, you're going to have these receipts provided from the listing agent. They are invoices. If they are planned on being paid at settlement, then those need to also be sent to the settlement agent so they can be put on the closing disclosure. These must be provided to you prior to doing a walkthrough and ultimately prior to closing on the property. The walkthrough is typically done within 24 hours of closing, sometimes a day or two more in advance of that. I do not like recommending doing a walkthrough on the same day of closing in case something is wrong or needs to be adjusted. The walkthrough is to do a couple of things. Make sure the seller is moved out of the home if they're supposed to be moved out prior to settlement. You're also confirming that these repairs based on the receipts and invoices were done. If there's an extenuating amount of repairs, you may want to have your buyer hire and pay for a re-inspection where the home inspector is going to come back and verify those repairs were done correctly. And you're also going to make sure the property is in the same condition as when the purchase agreement was signed for buying the house. This is also where you're going to confirm with the listing agent, this should say listing agent, not seller, that you have permission to take the key from the lockbox to settlement. And if they give you permission to do so, you're going to take it directly to the settlement agent. Do not drive around with the key to someone else's house in your car. Take it directly to the settlement agent and say, this is for the closing tomorrow. Closing time. Now, you want to confirm that possession takes place upon recording or upon settlement. That is typically how the contract defaults, and yet if there is a seller possession or extenuating circumstances, this may be different. Some best practices. Take photos of the closing table. This is your time to celebrate. You helped a client buy a house, and they should be in a good mood and happy. You want to attend the signing if possible. We just mentioned the walkthrough must be done prior to closing. Posted on social media, and some closing gifts, do's and don'ts. The best case scenarios for your closing gifts are to make them scalable and repeatable. You do not want to show evidence that you are playing favorites over one client versus another, especially if you're going to be tagging them in social media. I like things like Cutco knives or branded products such as cutting boards, etc., because they are repeatable for client regardless of purchase price. Now, another good thing to keep in mind is you want something that can be reused, so they're going to continue to think of you. A gift card to a fancy restaurant is great, except for the fact that once they've used that once, they no longer have a reminder of you and all the work you did to help them buy that house. Now, this is not necessarily required steps. These are just some best practices. Now, that is buyer 201. Congratulations on helping a client buy a house. And remember, reflect back on these videos at any time. They're going to be posted in the YouTube channel. And as always, we are here to help you anytime you need. And I look forward to catching you on the next stream. Take care.